أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. Respected viewers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Indeed, it is from the bounties of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we are blessed tonight to be within the precincts of the pure haram of Imam Al-Askari, Imam Ali ibn Muhammad Al-Hadi, and Imam Hasan ibn Ali Al-Askari salawatullahi alayhima ajma'een. It is within this divine haram located in the city of Samarra that we gather here tonight to discuss and to shed light on a few aspects of the life of both these great divinely appointed Imams, Imam Ali ibn Muhammad Al-Hadi wa Imam Hasan ibn Ali Al-Askari. Peace be upon them both. When we analyze and we contemplate and we study the life of Imam Ali ibn Muhammad Al-Hadi, historians mention to us that Imam Al-Hadi was born in a town called Sariya within the outskirts of Medina. This was in essence a town that was established by his grandfather, Imam Musa ibn Ja'far al-Kadhim, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayh. This town later on developed, and this is where Imam al-Hadi was born. Historians narrate that he undertook the divine responsibility of Imama at the tender age of 8. And you find that this is a phenomenon that was shared by his father, Imam Muhammad al-Jawad, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayh, who also undertook the responsibility of Imama at the tender age of 7. The fact that both these Imams undertook their responsibility of divine leadership at such a tender age in itself is one of the miracles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and is proof of the superiority of the madhab of Ahlul Bayt over any other sect and any other religion that exists. For indeed, for such a person who seemingly outwardly seems to be a child at the age of 8, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed within him the knowledge of all the Anbiya from Adam until Khatam, the most knowledgeable person on earth at the age of 8. This phenomenon in itself served as a sign that, or this phenomenon in itself represents the fact that Imam Ali ibn Muhammad Al-Hadi alayhi salam was an ayah from the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a sign from the very many signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, leading mankind towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For the narrations or the historians mention that Imam Al-Hadi undertook the responsibility of Imamate at the age of 8. Upon the martyrdom of his father, Imam Al-Jawad, Imam Al-Hadi returned back to the city of his grandfather, the city of Medina Al-Munawwara in the land of Hijaz. He spent the first approximately 20 years of his life in Medina, and as you can imagine, at the age of 8, as he would disseminate ilm, knowledge about the laws of the Sharia, about the laws of Islam, and he would talk about the history of the Holy Prophet and share the narrations of the Holy Prophet, explaining them, expanding upon them in the right manner. He became a center of attraction in that the people would gravitate towards Imam Al-Hadi for ilm. They would come to Imam Al-Hadi seeking intercession from him, seeking for their desires and their supplications to be accepted. And this is no point of amazement, and definitely does not constitute of shirk as many other deviant sects may believe. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has selected certain individuals. Through them our prayers are accepted. Through them we are able to seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are the intermediaries between us and the Lord of the universe. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "O you who believe, have taqwa." Fear in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, have fear of the day of judgment, fear the consequence of your actions, and seek a wasila, seek an intermediary towards him. These intermediaries are none other than Rasulullah and his household, the Ahlul Bayt, due to the divine purity which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ascertained for them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل Muhammad. And as per ittifaq from the ulama of the Amma and the Khasa, this verse was revealed on Rasulullah while he was under the Kisa, together with Amirul Mu'mineen, Sayyidah Fatima Zahra, Imam Hasan and Imam Al-Hussein, and by extension it includes the 9 Imams from the lineage of Imam Al-Hussein salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. When we look into this history of Imam Al-Hadi and we notice and we come to the understanding that he was a center of attraction in the city of Medina, this now began to catch the eye of the tyrants and the dictatorial regime of Bani Abbas, whose leadership, whose capital was based in the city of Baghdad, which they later on moved to the city of Samarra. Samarra in itself was a military garrison, a massive military base. You could think about it as a military base which encompassed a city, an entire city in itself. Therefore, it was a military base that comprised of a city, and the capital of the Bani Abbas regime was moved to the city of Samarra. So it is over here that the governor of Medina and the governor of Mecca, who were secretly observing and keeping a watch on the activities of Imam Al-Hadi, when they began to realize and recognize the strength and of the strength within the numbers of the people who followed Imam Al-Hadi, the popularity that he commanded from amongst the citizens of the state, this was a point of fear for them. And they had observations and they had reservations in regards to this. As you know, with every dictatorial regime, they are not able to handle and they are not able to bear the fact that there would be one other individual within their government who the people have love, respect, and look at him from an angle of authority. This is Bani Abbas, who had established leadership on earth on the false premise that they were the divinely appointed khulafa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore, when the real Khalif of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unveils himself and the people naturally gravitate towards him, they see this as a point of threat. In any case, the governor of Medina writes a letter to the Khalif of Bani Abbas, stating to him the activities of Imam Al-Hadi and how he was gaining popular support from amongst the masses. And the governor goes on to say to the Khalif that if the Khalif at that time being Mutawakkil, la'natullahi alayh, that if you have any need for the land of Hijaz, ya'ani, if you want to protect the land of Hijaz from any form of revolution or any form of rebellion against your government, then it is imperative for you to remove Imam Al-Hadi from the lands of Medina. This letter reached Mutawakkil. Mutawakkil then called for Imam Al-Hadi to be moved from Medina and be brought to the city of Samarra. You find that this was a tactic of deceit, in that he wrote a letter inviting Imam Al-Hadi, pretending to be respectful towards him and acknowledging his position, and to invite him as a dignitary and as a guest to Samarra. This was a story that was sold towards the public. However, within this there was deceit and there was nothing less than pure animosity. For when they called Imam Al-Hadi to the land of Samarra, he was brought against his wishes, and as soon as he came into the land of Samarra, he was forced under house arrest, imprisoned within his own house. In addition to the fact, for the time that he spent in Samarra, he was moved in a number of prisons. In fact, not far from the haram of Imam Al-Hadi and Imam Al-Askari alayhi salam, perhaps 3 or 4 kilometers from the haram, there is still traces of the Tamura, which is an underground prison that was dug 7 to 10 feet perhaps underneath the earth, in which Imam Al-Hadi was imprisoned. So you find that under these extreme situations, he was basically brought into Samarra such that the government may be able to keep an eye on him, such that they may disconnect him and make him aloof from the entire public. His access to the public was to be highly limited. Imam Al-Hadi was brought into the city of Samarra and kept under house imprisonment and tight government watch and control until the end of his life, where he was eventually poisoned. You find that the life and times of Imam Al-Hadi were absolutely challenging for him and for the Shias in particular. The ruler of Bani Abbas by the name of Mutawakkil in particular was a bloodthirsty person who ruled heartlessly and executed thousands of Shias, followers and lovers of Ahlul Bayt for the time that he was there in power. He was not able to stand any person who had any form of affiliation, love or loyalty towards Amir al-Mu'mineen and towards the Ahlul Bayt. You find, for example, from the many massacres and many executions that took place of the lovers of Ahlul Bayt, one that definitely stood out was the execution of one of the followers of Imam Al-Hadi by the name of Ibn Sikit. Ibn Sikit was a companion of Imam Al-Hadi and a companion of Imam Al-Jawad, a highly educated person who was an expert, a leading expert, you could say, in the fields of Arabic grammar and Arabic language and poetry and literature. He was from one of the companions of Imam Al-Jawad and Imam Al-Hadi. He was employed to teach the two children of Mutawakkil Arabic grammar and literature. And not out of will, but to a certain extent due to taqiyya, Ibn Sikit accepted the position and the responsibility of teaching the children of Mutawakkil Arabic grammar and language. And when you find that scholars and when you find followers of high caliber like those of Ibn Sikit, when they accept to take positions like this, it is not because they're showing any sort of servitude towards the government of that time, the tyrant government of that time. Balke, it could have been within the intentions and within the vision and the strategy of Ibn Sikit that through this position of teaching grammar and literature to the children of Mutawakkil, he would perhaps be able to influence them towards the path of Ahlul Bayt. In any case, one day as Ibn Sikit is teaching the two children, Mutawakkil calls him. He summons him to the court. And this is because of the rumors that was spreading around in regards to Ibn Sikit's affiliation to Imam Al-Hadi. So Mutawakkil wanted to test Ibn Sikit to see whether he truly adheres to this sect or no. They summon him to the court. And as they summon him to the court, Mutawakkil asks him a question. Ibn Sikit, who is more honorable in your eyes? My two sons, yani the ones whom he was teaching, my two sons, or the two sons of Ali ibn Abi Talib, yani Hasan and Hussein? Who is more honorable? Who is more elite? Who is more exalted, if you may say? Ibn Sikit was filled with anger and his blood was boiling. Anger in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he was not able to contain his sentiments that anyone, particularly from Bani Abbas, the likes of Mutawakkil, who are known for their fisq and their fasad and their ungodliness, to even think about comparing their children to the two children of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Sayyidai Shabab Ahl al-Jannah. For Ibn Sikit was not able to control his anger, and he says out to Mutawakkil with full confidence and with full courage. He says to them that, how dare you ask me about the two sons in regards to Hasan and Hussein? I find that even Kambar, the slave of Amir al-Mu'mineen, the servant of Amir al-Mu'mineen, to be better than your two sons. And this answer struck Mutawakkil like thunder from the skies. And he was not able to bear this answer. So he commanded his guards to take Ibn Sikit and to pull out his tongue. The historians mention that they pulled out his tongue. And in another tradition or in another version of history, it mentions that in addition to pulling out his tongue, he had his guards stab Ibn Sikit in the stomach to death. This is the way Mutawakkil dealt with the Shias of Amir al-Mu'mineen and the Shias of Imam Al-Hadi. These are the circumstances under which Imam Al-Hadi lived. We also have that during the period of Mutawakkil, the time in which Imam Al-Hadi conducted the responsibilities of Imama, Mutawakkil destroyed, out of his hatred for Imam Amirul Mu'mineen and his hatred for Ahlul Bayt, he destroyed the shrine of Sayyid al-Shuhada in Karbala 17 times. 17 times the haram of Imam al-Hussein was razed down to the ground. One of these times, the entire city of Karbala, the area around the Hadara, the grave of Imam al-Hussein, the entire area was razed down and the entire area was flooded. Another time when they destroyed the haram of Sayyid al-Shuhada in Karbala, the historians mention that 2 bulls or ox were brought such that they may plow the land over the grave of Imam al-Hussein, making sure that not a single trace of the grave of Imam al-Hussein would remain. Why? You find that prior to Imam al-Hadi, Imam al-Baqir and Imam al-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhima, there were hundreds of traditions encouraging the Shia to visit, to perform the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein, the importance and the thawab of crying for Imam al-Hussein, for reviving the tragedy of Karbala. Then on this end you find that Mutawakkil commands that the entire haram of Sayyid al-Shuhada be raised, not once but 17 times. Why? Because of the power that the revolution of Imam al-Hussein wields in itself. This commemoration of the Aza of Sayyid al-Shuhada, getting together, reviving his memory, reviving the manner in which he was persecuted, the manner in which he was killed on the day of Ashura together with his family members. This in itself wells within it a spiritual power. It creates within the masses this fervor and this sense of revolution to stand up against dhulm, to stand up and protect the rights of Ahlul Bayt. And Mutawakkil understood the potential of the potential that lies within reviving the dhikr of Ahlul Bayt, and in particular the dhikr of Sayyid al-Shuhada. He understood the power that is represented within the institution of ziyarah, which is why he commanded the entire haram of Imam al-Hussein, the grave of Imam al-Hussein, to be destroyed 17 times during his rulership. Not only that, in addition to all this, the people who would travel from different parts of the Islamic land to perform the ziyarah of Sayyid al-Shuhada, during the time of Mutawakkil, his guards used to tax the Zawar. They would have to pay high amounts of money. Many times they would have to sell their houses just in order to go and pay tribute to the grave of Imam al-Hussein, which they did happily. When Mutawakkil saw that all the financial penalties is not serving its purpose in terms of being a hindrance towards the ziyarah, Mutawakkil used to command his guards that any person who is caught or any person who is seen visiting Imam al-Hussein, one of his limbs should be severed. So therefore, people who would go for ziyarah, when they were stopped, you could say at checkpoints by the army or by the guards, by the military, their arms would be severed. You'd find a person who goes for ziyarah, the first year his right arm is severed. His right arm is severed as a tax to go for ziyarah. You find another time, the same person goes for ziyarah again, his right hand is amputated, he would give his left hand in amputation. And therefore you see that when you study the life of Imam Al-Hadi, the difficulties, the trials and the tribulations that were rampant during that time is one that is unmatched perhaps in any other part of history. And this in itself should serve as a reminder to you and I, the expense and the difficulty through which we have been able to receive our religion today. All this happening during the time of Imam Al-Hadi. The historians also mention that it is during the time of Imam Al-Hadi that the likes of Mutawakkil promoted sectarianism during their rule. Yani it was during the time of Mutawakkil that he promoted sectarianism within the Islamic Ummah, and this is through the funding and the establishment of false, deviant sects that would then be a form of, if you could say, competition towards Imam Al-Hadi. Imam Al-Hadi was recognized as the sole Khalifa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on earth, and that tashayyu represented the true Islam through which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is worshipped in the way that He willed. It is through the Ahlul Bayt that the Quran is understood and interpreted in the right way, free of any distortions. So Mutawakkil and the likes of Mutawakkil, they began to create sects that would then compete in terms of authority against Imam Al-Hadi. And through this, many people were deviated away from Imam Al-Hadi. And chaos was prevalent within the Islamic Ummah. You find that from many of the deviant sects that were formed during the time of Imam Al-Hadi, one of them was the sect of the Ghulat. They were rampant, they existed even before the time of Imam Al-Hadi. But during every age, during every period, this sect of the Ghulat was revived, and a personality as the head of the sect would emanate, would arise to cause confusion, not only draw people away from Imam Al-Hadi in terms of a competing sect, if you may say, but at the same time to create confusion within the circles of the Shia. You find that one such individual was Ali ibn Hasaka. Ali ibn Hasaka was from the Ghulat. The Ghulat, by the way, those who are guilty of the crime of ghulu. This was a sect that was formed by the enemies of Ahlul Bayt, as is attested to by Imam Rida alayhi salam. You notice that the ghulu are those people. Who are the Ghulat? The Ghulat are those who attribute lordship to Allah, to the Ahlul Bayt. Yani they claim that Ahlul Bayt in themselves are reincarnations wal-ayadu billah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They claim that the Ahlul Bayt are the manifestation of the essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is an important definition for us to understand. Unlike a definition which is prevalent today, that anybody who speaks about the exalted merits of Ahlul Bayt, the fada'il of Ahlul Bayt, the fact that they have ilmul ghaib, the fact that they are able to perform miracles, the fact that the power of kun fayakun is granted to them by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this does not constitute ghulu. Ghulu is to attest rububiyyah to them. And there is a very fine difference in regards to this, and a very clear difference. The likes of Ali ibn Hasaka, they would come around and they would preach to the people that Imam Al-Hadi in essence is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is a reincarnation of the God, and that he himself, Ali ibn Hasaka, is the representative of Imam Al-Hadi. And you find that it is ideas such as these where they were propagated, funded by the likes of Mutawakkil, such that people would deviate from the following of Imam Al-Hadi on one side, and on the other side, the wider Islamic Ummah would look at Imam Al-Hadi and they would have hatred in their hearts for Imam Al-Hadi because of the likes of the teachings of Ali ibn Hasaka. Taban, without doubt, Imam Al-Hadi had nothing to do with this, and he issued a number of statements condemning Ali ibn Hasaka and educating the Shia through his wukala to stay away from the likes of Ali ibn Hasaka. In fact, we have that from one of the companions of Imam Al-Hadi, there was a companion known as Fadl ibn Shahdan. During his life, he authored 180 books of hadith. And from these 180 books, one of his books or a couple of his books was clearing and answering back to the shubuhat or to the false ideologies preached by Ali ibn Hasaka. From amongst the other trials and tribulations that Imam Al-Hadi saw within his life was the establishment of these false sects. You find that within the life of Imam Al-Hadi, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayh, there were a number of places, a number of times in his life where he performed a number of miracles, phenomenal events and phenomenal activities through which his superiority was established over the rest of the creation. In fact, there were a number of miracles that he performed in order to prove to the people that he was the divinely selected and the divinely appointed Khalifa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are very many fascinating occurrences that happened during the life of Imam Al-Hadi that exhibit his superiority. However, for tonight we shall mention three of these. Number one, the Imam is divinely protected by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the Imam is blessed with the power of wilaya takwiniya. Yani the Imam has wilaya over the entire kawn. The historians narrate, by way of example, that at one time, one of the governors of Mutawakkil had suggested that because of the threat Imam Al-Hadi poses to the government of the time, they should just execute him. But they should not execute him in any normal way. They should give him the most painful of deaths, such that if he was killed in this way, none of his followers would ever dare to openly say that they are affiliated with him. If anybody thought of affiliating themselves with Imam Ali ibn Muhammad Al-Hadi, they would think twice. How? They decided to throw Imam Al-Hadi into a den that was filled with lions. As you know, from one of the passions and one of the pastimes of Mutawakkil, La'natullah alayh, was that he would gather all these wild animals and he would cage them for his own entertainment, for his own pleasure. And there was a den in Samarra which contained lions. The historians mention that the army of Mutawakkil came, they arrested Imam Al-Hadi and they threw him down into the den, hoping that he would be eaten alive and his body would be mutilated, he would be eaten up by the lions. The historians mention that as Imam Al-Hadi was thrown into the den, and what we understand from the narration is that he was thrown from a certain height. As he fell down to the ground, Imam Al-Hadi stood up, he shaked the dust, or he wiped off the dust from his clothes, he dusted off his clothes. He stood in the middle of the den. The lions came running towards Imam Al-Hadi. They stopped at him. The Imam was seen to be uttering some sort of dhikr through his blessed lips. The historians mention that the lions stood by Imam Al-Hadi, they went down on their four legs and they bowed their heads as if in prostration, in terms of humility towards Imam Al-Hadi. Hours later, the governor comes together with a number of the army and they observe what has happened. They are expecting that Imam Al-Hadi may already by now be devoured by these lions. When they come and they observe from the top of the den, they find that Imam Al-Hadi is standing in a state of salat with all khushu, in full concentration, in salat, praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, while the lions are seated obediently around him. You find that actions like these, no other imam from no other sect is able to claim that they can perform acts like these or perform miracles such as these or have any sort of wilaya, authority over the creation apart from the imams of Ahlul Bayt. The governor goes and reports this incident to Mutawakkil. Mutawakkil says, leave Ali ibn Muhammad, yani Imam Al-Hadi, leave him in the den for 3 days. Perhaps the lions, out of hunger, if the lions are not fed for 3 days, the lion in itself, being an animal with its beastly instinct to kill and hunt out of hunger for survival, perhaps they will devour Imam Al-Hadi. 3 days later, they come and they see that Imam Al-Hadi is in the same state. 3 days without any food, without any water, in a state of salat with these lions on his side. This was one incident of how, this is one incident that shows us from the life of Imam Al-Hadi how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has bestowed him with wilaya takwiniya. Another incident that happened that also involves lions, surprisingly, is during the time of Imam Al-Hadi, there happened to be a lady who claimed to be Zainab al-Kubra, Sayyidah Zainab al-Kubra, the daughter of Amir al-Mu'mineen, alayha salam. So she came forward to the crowd, to the people of the time in the city of Samarra, and she cried out, "Oh people, I am Zainab, the daughter of Imam Ali." So the people were the leaders of the Talibiyin within the family of Abu Talib who were present in Samarra. They came up to her and they said, "How can you be Sayyidah Zainab al-Kubra?" And that she already died at these many years ago, hundreds of years ago. She said, "No, I have been brought back to life by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I am Zainab, the daughter of Ali." So they were in confusion on how to ascertain the validity of this claim. And the fact that she claims that she's been reborn and that every few years Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala renews her youth. They were confused on what to do and how to get to the bottom of this matter. So the historians mentioned they came to Imam Al-Hadi. They said, "You are from the grandchildren of Ali ibn Abi Talib. and there is this lady who claims to be Zainab al-Kubra. How can we validate this claim? Is this true? Imam Al-Hadi says, of course it's not true. He says, how can we prove it? He says, we will prove it in public. They call Imam Al-Hadi to the court of Mutawakkil, the courts of Bani Abbas. This lady is brought in front of Imam Al-Hadi, and she claims to be that she is Zainab, the daughter, Sayyidah Zainab, the daughter of Amirul Mu'minin. Imam Al-Hadi then makes a declaration. And you got to understand that the entire public, the people of Samarra, the residents of Samarra had gathered within the courts. This is a huge claim. The person claiming to be Sayyidah Zainab, the daughter of Imam Ali, is alive between them, brought back to life. Miraculous claim. What goals, what reasons, what agendas they might be behind that, Allahu Alam. Imam Al-Hadi is there to disprove the claim. Imam Al-Hadi is the only one who can disprove the claim. So Imam Al-Hadi comes, she is brought in front of him, she makes her claim again. Imam Al-Hadi says, we have a tradition from our grandfather, the Holy Prophet, whereby he says, the flesh of the Sada, yani the flesh of the children of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam and Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam is haram upon the animals. Yani, if you truly claim to be from the children of Amirul Mu'minin and Sayyidat Nisa al-Alameen, no animal can devour you. There is a divinity and a sanctity in regards to their body. You can't be devoured by wild animals. So if you are true to your claim, let us put you into the den filled with lions. If they do not devour you, we know that your claim is true. And if they devour you, we know that you are a liar. Mutawakkil was absolutely pleased with this, and he said, this is a good idea, I think we should do it. The historians mention that as they were taking the lady to the den of the lions, she began to cry and she confessed that she was lying. Mutawakkil says to Imam Al-Hadi, well, if what your claim that the true children are from the lineage of Imam Ali, Amirul Mu'minin and Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra will never be devoured by wild animals, let us see if you yourself fit this bracket or not. So they decided to throw Imam Al-Hadi into the cage of lions or into the den of lions. The narrations mentions, just like the first time, Imam Al-Hadi was thrown into the den and the lions approached him. They stood by his side and they went down on their four limbs as if in a state of prostration. And this is happening in the presence of the entire population of Samarra. And through this, Mutawakkil's plan failed. He wanted to humiliate, and perhaps he thought this would be the best way to get rid of Imam Al-Hadi. But you find that actually the opposite happened. And this incident in itself became a reason for hundreds of people, if not converting towards Tashayyu, for their love and their respect for Imam Al-Hadi to raise inside of their hearts. Another incident from the Mu'jizat that took place during the time of Imam Al-Hadi is the incident of Yunus al-Nakash, which shows that from amongst the characters of a divinely selected Imam is that apart from the fact that they have wilayah taqweeniyah, that they are endowed, they are bestowed with ilmul ghaib from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They have knowledge of the unseen, they have the knowledge of the past, and they have the knowledge of the future even before it occurs. And one such example, a display of this character by Imam Al-Hadi was during the time of Yunus al-Nakash. The historians mention that there was a governor of Bani Abbas by the time of Musa ibn Bagha, and Musa ibn Bagha had a particular gem, a rare stone you could say, or a gem, where he went to one of the companions of Imam Al-Hadi who was known to work in this industry of rings. He went to him and he said to him that I have got this ring, I need an engravement to be done on this, and I need this ring back by XYZ day. The companion said fine. As he was making the engravement on the ring, the gem or the stone broke into two pieces. You are subcontracted by the governor of Bani Abbas, the likes of Musa ibn Bagha, who are known for bloodshed, who are known for their atrocities. For you to have damaged one of his belongings, that even something such as a pure gem, this was definitely leading towards execution. This companion comes running to Imam Al-Hadi and he says to him, Ya Ibn Rasulullah, this is the incident that happened. Musa ibn Bagha had given me a job to engrave the ring, and instead the ring, I have broken it, and I'm sure that when I'm summoned, he's going to execute me. Imam Al-Hadi smiles and he says to him, don't worry. Ajib. How do you mean don't worry? He's definitely going to kill me. This person was summoned to the court of Musa ibn Baga a couple of days later. He comes to Imam Al-Hadi and he says, Ya Imam, I'm coming to you to give you my final wasiyah, my final testimony, my final will. Please take care of my family after me. Musa ibn Baga has summoned me to the court. I know it has to do with the ring, and because I've broken it, I'm definitely going to be executed. Imam Al-Hadi smiles at him with all coolness, with all calmness, and he says to him, do not worry, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of it. For a moment, if you and I put ourselves in the situation of this companion, how much iman and how much yaqeen does it take for you to submit to the words of your imam? This is a level of conviction that you are supposed to have within our imam, that even if the odds are against us, if the imam tells you that something is going to be okay, it's going to be okay. Musa ibn Baga goes to sleep that night. Allah knows how he slept that night. But he had iman and he had full belief in the words of the imam. He had this trait within him, taslim, total submission to the imam. Whatever the imam says goes. Imam had promised him and comforted him that Musa ibn Baga will not touch him, and whatever happens it will be khair, will be goodness. Companion goes to the court the following day and is trembling and shivering. Musa ibn Baga comes to him and he says, listen, you know that ring that I gave you some days back for engravement? Companion says, yes. He says, I have a problem. The companion says, what problem? I was astounded. He says, what problem? He says that between both my wives like this gem so much. Each one of them wants this gem. But because it's so rare, it's difficult for me to find another gem like this. So I have summoned you to the court to ask you if you would be able to carve this gem or break this gem into two parts, into two equal parts. That way I can gift each and every one of them one of these gems. And from here the companion was filled with relief. And he said to Musa bin Baga, yes, it can be done. When he was let out of the court, he went straight away to Imam Al-Hadi and he thanked him for comforting him and for assuring him. How did the Imam know that this is going to be khair? Ilmul Ghaib granted to him by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we listen to incidences like these, and we understand that the Imam has Ilmul Ghaib. Number one, these is definitely not shirk. This is an ilm given to them by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is incidences like these that show us the superiority of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, in that they are selected by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. From the divine responsibilities of the divinely selected Imams, you find is that they guide people towards the right path. And you will find that within Islamic history, if you were to analyze the history of each and every one of the Imams, from Imam Hasan al-Mujtaba all the way up to Maulana Sahib al-Amri wa Zaman, you will notice that the primary message of each and every one of those Imams was to invite the people towards the wilayah of Maulana Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayh. And you find that Imam Al-Hadi alayhi salam was exceptional. Every Imam was exceptional. But there are certain stances of Imam Al-Hadi that stand out when it comes to defending the wilayah of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Therefore, if you want to understand Imam Ali ibn Muhammad Al-Hadi, and we are in this place which is Mubarak, in the haram of Imam Al-Hadi, by the grave of Imam Al-Hadi in his house. If you would want to understand who is Imam Al-Hadi, in one statement, the defender and the protector of the wilayah of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. We ask, what is the dalil for this? The dalil for this, we have two proofs, and you find this within the books of the Ad'iyah, including Mafatihul Jinan. There are two ziyaras that are particularly narrated by Imam Ali ibn Muhammad Al-Hadi pertaining to the wilayah of Amir al-Mu'mineen. The first ziyarah is Ziyaratul Ghadir. This ziyarah, which is absolutely important to recite on Eid al-Ghadir. This ziyarah, which denotes bay'ah to Maulana Amir al-Mu'mineen, was taught to us by Imam Ali al-Hadi. In my humble opinion, advice to myself and advice to the viewers, that it is necessary and imperative as lovers and followers of Ahlul Bayt that we read this Ziyaratul Ghadir, which is narrated by Maulana Imam Ali Al-Hadi, and we contemplate over the words. And you find that the depth and the reality of religion is contained within Ziyaratul Ghadir. The depth and the reality of Imamah is understood in Eidul Ghadir. I select one statement that we recite in Eidul Ghadir taught to us by Imam Al-Hadi alayhi salam in regards to the importance, in regards to the centrality of wilaya and the imama to the deen of Islam. Look at what Imam Al-Hadi says. Ashhadu ya Amir al-Mu'mineen anna shaka feek ma amana bir Rasul al-Amin. Ajib. Imam Al-Hadi says, I bear witness, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, anna shaka feek ma amana bir Rasul al-Amin. The one who doubts in you, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, I bear witness that the one who doubts in you, Aslan did not even believe in Rasulullah. Yani to doubt the wilaya of Amir al-Mu'mineen, according to Imam Al-Hadi, Hujjatullah fil ard, Ma'asum Imam, the one who doubts in the wilaya of Amir al-Mu'mineen, the one who has shak in the wilaya of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Aslan ma amana bir Rasul. Aslan didn't even believe in Rasulul Amin. This is the message that is given to us by Imam Al-Hadi. Ya akhi, if to doubt Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Al-Hadi says, is to disbelief in the message of Rasulullah, then what about those people who fought Amir al-Mu'mineen? Whether they fought him in Jamal or in Naharwan or in Siffin, the one who waged war against Amir al-Mu'mineen, who killed him and killed his supporters. And you find that in regards to this, there is another ziyarah which is narrated to us by Imam Al-Hadi. And if you look into the history of Imam Al-Hadi, you will find that he was very staunch in encouraging and establishing the institution of ziyarah, as we mentioned before. Ziyarah of Imam Al-Hussein, even though people were getting killed and they had to give their limbs as sacrifice in order to go for ziyarah. But you find that in addition to that, one of the ziyarahs which is narrated by Imam Al-Hadi is Ziyarat al-Jami'ah. There are a number of ziyarat within our books of ad'iyah, books of dua, that are known as Ziyaratul Jami'ah. There is a number of them. One of these ziyarahs is narrated by Imam Al-Hadi. And again, Ziyaratul Jami'ah is a beautiful ziyarah with great depth, ma'arif, treasures from underneath the arsh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That you find inside Ziyaratul Jami'ah. Again, advice for myself and advice for you. Whenever you get a chance to recite Ziyaratul Jami'ah, think on the meanings, contemplate on the meanings. Particularly those lovers and followers of Ahlul Bayt who have the opportunity and the blessing to go for ziyarat, be it at the time of Ashura or Arafah or in the ziyarah of Arba'iniyya. Recite Ziyaratul Jami'ah at any one of the harams and read the translation or the meanings and contemplate over the depths. To illustrate one of these meanings, you have again Imam Ali Al-Hadi alayhi salam in Ziyaratul Jami'ah says, when he's addressing the Ahlul Bayt, one part of the ziyarah he says, Assalamu alaykum ya abwab al-iman. He addresses the Ahlul Bayt, yani he teaches us to address the Ahlul Bayt by saying to them, Assalamu alaykum ya abwab al-iman. Yani, peace be upon you, salam be upon you, the doors to Iman. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how many times in the Quran says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu? Imam Al-Hadi is telling us that in order for you to be considered in that bracket of mu'mineen, in order for you to possess the trait of Iman, the door of Iman is Ahlul Bayt. It is not possible to gain Iman without the wilayah of Ahlul Bayt. And you find that under these difficult and complex times, Imam Al-Hadi bravely comes out, and through the institution of ziyarah, he teaches us the importance, the centrality, the divinity of imamate when it comes to the religion of Islam. Imam Al-Hadi, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, was martyred during the time of the Abbasid Khalif by the name of Mu'taz, la'natullahi alayh. And the narrations mention that he brought forward poisoned pomegranates, which he then forced the Imam to eat in front of him. The historians tell us that when Imam Al-Hadi consumed this poison pomegranate, the intensity of the poison within this pomegranate was such that the Imam, his entire body began to swell up and the complexion of his blessed face changed to be extremely pale because of the poison. For 3 days the Imam suffered due to the poison administered to him by Mu'taz. The narration mentions that on the final night of his life, before his ruh ascended towards the heaven, he was lying down on the floor, sometimes turning to the left and sometimes turning to the right out of pain due to the poison that was administered to him. Another one of the companions mentions that the Imam says, it is as if my interiors are being cut into pieces by swords due to the impact of the poison. And it is in this state that Imam Al-Hadi calls his son Imam Hasan Al-Askari. And Imam Al-Askari is by his chest at his final moments. Imam Al-Hadi looks at him and he begins to cry. And he says to him, "Oh my son Hasan, convey my salams to the one who is the savior of mankind after you. Yani grant my salams or give my salams to the awaited Mahdi." Allahu Akbar. Imam Al-Hadi, even on his deathbed, his final words is that he remembers Maulana Sahib al-Amri wa Zaman. The narrations mention that Imam Al-Hadi appointed Imam Al-Hasan Al-Askari as the final Imam. He gave him the Dhul Fikar, he gave him the Jami', he gave him the Mus'haf, he gave him the Aqiq, the ring of the Imams, and this is from amongst the inheritances of the left behind by the Imam. He gives this to Imam Hasan Al-Askari. The narration mentions that he then straightened his legs, he straightened his hands, he recited the Shahada for the final time. He looked at Imam Hasan Al-Askari and the remainder of his family looked up towards the heaven. The sweat of death began to drop down his forehead and the ruh of Imam Ali Al-Hadi left the dunya. You find that the historians tell us that Imam Hasan Al-Askari alayhi salam comes out in the funeral procession of his father without an amama, barefooted, and his entire robe was torn. And you find that this is one of the elements of Aza, one of the elements of mourning, which was carried out by the Imams and carried out till today, that at a time of intense grief, the front part of the robe is ripped open, known as Shaqqul Jayb. You find that Imam Al-Askari comes out in this manner, and a number of his people rebuked him for coming out in the procession, the funeral procession of his father in this manner. And what is apparent is they are his own followers who rebuked him, because they said, "Yabna Rasulullah, grandson of the Holy Prophet, it does not befit that you come out in this manner and in this appearance in front of the people." And Imam Hasan Al-Askari says to him, "Woe be upon you. Do you not know that Musa mourned for Harun in the same manner?" And you find that this companion keeps quiet. And this, Ya Ahibba'i, is a lesson for you and I. And many times when it comes to commemorating the grief of Ahlul Bayt, particularly the grief of Imam Al-Hussein, sometimes there are particular acts of mourning, particular acts of grief that you and I may not accept or adhere to, but it does not befit for us to come and belittle them or to condemn them, particularly keeping in mind that a lot of these are warranted, if not all of them are warranted by the Ahlul Bayt. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to inspire us to study the life of Imam Al-Hadi, to be able to draw lessons from the life of Imam Al-Hadi. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we are able to implement the teachings of Imam Al-Hadi in our lives, and inshallah we get an opportunity to visit Imam Al-Hadi's haram in the dunya and seek his shafa'ah in the akhirah from this blessed shrine of Imamain Al-Askariyin in Samarra. Fi amanillah.